Welcome back to Get Down to Business, this show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Paul Herbert, who is the Executive Director of the First Division Museum at Cantigny. There's a very special commemoration, and I'm thrilled to have Dr. Herbert as our guest. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely. So for our listeners that have not been following the McCormick Foundation's fantastic press releases and publicity about the upcoming Battle of Cantigny anniversary, please enlighten us. It's such a pleasure to have you. Tell us about the Battle of Cantigny.
Yeah, well, we're at Cantini Park in Wheaton, and we're named for a little village in France where the first American battle of World War I took place on May 28, 1918, actually till May 31st. And that will be 100 years ago this month, and it happens to coincide with the Memorial Day weekend, and so we're having a number of activities throughout that weekend to observe that very important centennial.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Herbert, give me a little bit of background on you and how you've become such an expert and a thought leader on this topic. How did you? What's your story? How did you become interested?
Well, I'm a retired military officer, and I've got a pretty good academic background in military history. And for the last 14 years, I've been the executive director of the First Division Museum at Cantini Park, dedicated to the First Infantry Division of the U.S. Army. So we tell 101 years of American history through the story of that division. We do that because our benefactor, Colonel Robert R. McCormick, who formerly owned the Tribune, among his many, many other accomplishments, he was a citizen soldier in the First Division in World War I. And so he's the one who named the park Cantini after the battle, and he's the person who established this legacy of commitment to not only our soldiers but our service members and our veterans.
So there is going to be a large ceremony at 11 a.m., as you said, on Memorial Day weekend on May 26th. Coming up, it's literally right around the corner, commemorating the men who fought and died in the battle. What can people expect then, but also what takes place beyond the commemoration? What goes on a regular basis that I think you are quite privileged to live on a day to day, even aside for special commemorations.
Yeah, well, let me say one thing real quickly, that the special observance at Cantini Park in Wheaton will be on May 28th.
Oh,
the
got
May
it.
26th ceremony is in Cantini, France. And so we're observing this important centennial in a couple of different places and at a couple of different times. But here in the Chicago area, it's May 28th. Now, there'll be things going on at Cantini Park all through the Memorial Day weekend. And so people can come out there at any time. Note that we're having concerts and special events. The American Legion will be there distributing poppies. And it's a great time and occasion for people to visit Cantini Park. On a regular basis, the park is phenomenally beautiful. We're re-landscaping it at the moment, so it looks like it ought to be closed because of all the heavy equipment and fencing and things, but we're not closed. All of our facilities are open. The one that I direct is the First Division Museum. We just did the first extensive renovation of the museum last year for the centennial of the First Division. And if I do say so myself, it's a fantastic museum. And if you have an hour or two, and even if you have seen it before, but you haven't seen it since we reopened last August, it's worth the trip.
Interesting. So this is a centennial celebration, 100 years. So what, if I may ask, what has changed, and what do you see as being quite the same as 100 years ago in the world of war and in the world of battle. Obviously, you being a retired military officer yourself, I know that the 1st Division Museum, you have a number of displays and exhibits of some of the vehicles and war tanks and other fleets. I'm curious what similarities and differences you see between 100 years ago and now.
Yeah, well, 100 years ago, our Army was organized differently than it is today. And I would say one of the big differences is that the periods between war and peace tended to be very clear. We declared war in April of 1917. We sent 2 million troops to France over the next 18 months. We fought vicious battles that brought World War I to an end with the armistice in November of 1918. We immediately demobilized the troops, brought them home, and there was 20 years of peacetime before the bombing of Pearl Harbor got us into another war. Today, it seems, we're all very thankful that we are not at war, certainly not a war on the scale of World War I anywhere on the planet, but our military is very, very busy all around the world because it's protecting our security interests and the interests of our allies. And so it's a very busy military, and sometimes that's violent activity, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Often it's not violent activity, it's the presence of the American military. So that's a difference. One of the similarities that I like to observe is that in World War I, American leaders, officers, generals were confronted with an array of dazzling new technology. It looks old-fashioned to us, but when you think about it, trucks with motors instead of horses and wagons, aircraft, electronic communications, weapons of mass destruction in the form of gas, all kinds of new technologies that had not existed 10 years before the war. And our military is dealing with a similar array of new and sometimes sort of strange technologies today. And so that's a similarity. The other thing that is similar that hasn't changed a bit is that in the 1st Division, in the Army, and then our armed services, it's about brave young Americans who take an oath to go where we the people send them and put themselves at risk on our behalf. And that is why we make a big deal about Memorial Day and Veterans Day and anniversaries such as the Battle of Cantini.
That's very, very helpful. Once again, we're chatting with Dr. Paul Herbert, who directs the 1st Division Museum. The upcoming commemoration of the Battle of Cantigny is coming up May 28th. If you want to go to France, it's May 26th, and I made that mistake, but May 28th in Wheaton, Illinois. So I'm wondering, Dr. Herbert, so again, you direct the 1st Division Museum, the 1st Infantry Division. So what was it 100 years ago? You've talked a lot about the war history, but what was the 1st Infantry Division then? And I'm curious, what is it currently?
Well, in layperson's terms, a division is a team of teams. It's a very big military organization. It varies anywhere from 15 to 25,000 soldiers. And in that organization is everything that would be needed to operate on a battlefield. So it's not only infantry, foot soldiers with rifles, but it's the artillery, it's the communications, it's the logistical support, it's the intelligence, the reconnaissance, the engineering, the aviation, all of the other things that makes that organization capable of doing many, many different things on a battlefield. That's what a division is. The 1st Division is called the 1st Division because it's America's 1st Division. We didn't have permanently established divisions before World War I. The first one we organized, we called the 1st Division, and it's been on active duty every day for 101 years now.
So, Dr. Herbert, I want to make sure we squeeze in the information or how people can learn more about the centennial celebration. of the Battle of Cantini. How can people learn more?
Best way is to go to our website, fdmuseum.org. That's F like in Fox, D like in dog, museum.org. It stands for First Division Museum.org.
Well, I hope our listeners will check it out, fdmuseum.org. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Paul Herbert. We'll be back and get down to business after this quick break. Thanks for joining us.
At AM 560.